To the Finance Committee meeting of December 12th, 2023. Roll call, everyone is present, I can see that. Are there any declaration of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we'll move to approval of the agenda. A motion to approve the December 12th, 2023 Finance Committee meeting agenda be approved as circulated. Someone to bring the motion, Councillor Kennis. Second by Councillor Hippel. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Before we go on to the other business, I thought lay out the plan or what I hope or what I think we should accomplish this evening. This meeting did come about because there is a request from councillors to sit and talk amongst ourselves about our priorities. I think that's important. I think we need to be able to give staff clear direction, the direction that we want to go in. So I think I have 3 goals, and I'll certainly listen to others, but I think we should accomplish 3 things this evening. One is come to an agreement on what our priorities are as a council moving forward. I think that's an important discussion. The second is a look at where we think taxation should be, and as Director Dakin did remind me, we had a discussion earlier that was moved by council, but given the realities and what we've seen in front of us, we may need to append that. I think if we can arrive at that, that's 2 clear direction for council, 2 items. And I think thirdly, and very important, is we need to arrive at an end date for this process. I don't know how many people know that yesterday the City of London released their budget, and the one thing amongst others that I noticed was they have a hard end date at their budget date. It's, I think, the 2nd week of March. This is important work. We need to get it done. Staff needs it done. The public needs to have it done. So if we can agree on an end date, I think that helps all of us to have an end date. We can have meetings accordingly and put some discipline. One thing I'm going to start with, we all want to talk, and I think what I'd like to do is just go around the horseshoe and ask everyone to give 5 minutes, talk about what you think the priorities are, what do you think the hurdles are, just uninterrupted, give everyone a chance to speak, and then we will open it up to a discussion, because I think that's where we need to start. So I'm going to go first, if you don't mind. We're not unique. We're not the only municipality that is facing the challenges that we are. I know I looked at the asset management plan, and I did too know the infrastructure gap or the spending deficit, but I'll tell you, we're not the only municipality that's facing that problem. We're not unique in that way. We're not unique in that we have infrastructure that needs to be fixed. And we're not unique in looking at tax increases or doing stuff we may not want to do. We all are facing the same economic climate. That's really where I'm at. We have work to do. We need to roll up our sleeves and do it. But I do have a request of council, and we've been at this for a year. I don't want to hear any more old council, new council. What was, folks, we're at where we're at today. We got to put the past behind us. We got work to do. We're all in this together. This is the cards we're dealt. Let's deal with it. So with that, I'm going to ask Councillor Hippel if you'd like to talk about. I apologize for putting you first. We can go the other way, but you're to my right. Let's have a discussion about our priorities.
Okay. Well, thank you. I am on the spot a little bit, but I wasn't, so when I was looking at priorities, and I know that we had discussed, why we were doing this, because we all wanted to sit down and talk what we thought the most important things were. But it's really hard when you're looking at this to say, this is the most important, nothing else matters. Obviously, in my world, the ward that I live in, the area I live in, is obviously it's not just Mount Bridges, it's in the rural areas as well, and we kind of encompass a fair amount of residents and businesses and many farms. But water is huge. Now there are areas that they have their own water, and that's okay. But I mean, water is huge. Water is safety. Water is everything. So I'm always looking at the water and wastewater, and that's been a big confusion for me probably for the last year and a bit. So in my own world, when I wrote things down, that was the first thing that came to my mind. Before anything else, that was the thing that came to my mind. I harp all the time on roads. I do, because I mean, roads have been my thing since I started 5 years ago. And when I say roads, I don't mean, before Councillor Derbyshire gives me the funny look, I don't just mean tar and chip. But the idea of our transportation in and out and sidewalks and all of those things, I've been harping on those for years. But at the same time, I mean, I think we have to look at what is going to have, like, how our community is going to function properly. Anyways, and I think that starts with water and wastewater. When it comes to taxation, I mean, we have got an incredible amount of families, businesses, in our municipality. And when I say an incredible amount, I'm not making that up. That's real, that are struggling. They are barely making, if they're making their mortgage payments. They are working 2, 3, 4 jobs. They're trying everything. They've got kids that they can't afford to put in daycare, so they're grasping at anything that they can to help with that. We're living in a time right now where it's just stress and a lot of angst. So, you know, would it be possible to say, let's do all the things we need to do and not raise taxes? Wow, wouldn't that be amazing? That's not gonna happen. We have a lot of work to do. And I really want us to start working. And I want to get down and dirty, and I want to get the things done. So, but I need help. I'm just one person. So I like to listen around the horseshoe, because everyone here has such great ideas that really come from the people that they're with. And we all have different people talking to us, and we all see different things. So my priority might be slightly different than somebody else's, but I think as together, I would just want us to get things done. I really do. Anyways, that's it. I don't even know if I said anything that you guys think is worthwhile, but in my head, this is where I'm going.
Everything's worthwhile, Councillor Heppel. That's what we're here for. Councillor Kennis.
I start with a story. I apologize for that, but back, it reminded me last week about it, back in 97 when I was on council from 97 to 2000. The last term of the Strathroy Council, that council embarked on a pretty big capital spending program, about $12 million, built the Gemini twin pads, arranged for the land for the 2 high schools, bought industrial land, the Molnar Industrial Park, built the police station, built the PUC building, turned the old PUC building into the senior center. So a lot of money was spent in a fairly short period of time. I think it was about $12 million. Convert that to today, that I did my little looked it up. It's 12 million back in 1999 was about 22 million today. Interest rates were the same. Prime was about 7% then, it's about 7% now. There's a lot of projects that need to be done, and kicking them down the road forever doesn't work. Can we do everything? No. What are priorities? Water and wastewater, and I think we have plans in place for that. We also, approved the fire station in Strathroy last week. We need to do one in Mount Bridges. We also need to do some major road work like the downtown here in Strathroy, and there's other projects like that. Am I suggesting that we overload ourselves with projects in debt? Absolutely not. I'm as cheap with my own money as anyone I know, and I feel the same way about the town, but that doesn't mean we can put things off forever. They need to be done. Tax rate increases, yeah, it'd be great if we didn't have to increase taxes, but every municipality that I hear in the area is talking like somewhere between 5 and 8% per year, and I think it's part of what we're in, a lot of inflation the last couple of years. But, you know, we pride ourselves as being a progressive community, and if we want to be a growing and progressive community, we have to maintain the infrastructure that we have and improve upon it so that people will want to live in this community. And that's all I have to say.
Thanks for that. Councillor Wilsey?
I'm not going to repeat a lot of what the first two councillors said, because I actually agree with pretty much everything. There's not much I can argue with any of it, and it doesn't seem like me to not argue, but I'm not going to argue with any of it. I think it's all great. We need water, we need wastewater, we need roads. But I'm going to hit on a couple other points that I think are probably pretty important. We need to make sure that the residents who are in Mount Bridges and the areas outside of Strathroy feel like they're part of the community. That's one of the most important parts going forward. We need to make sure that if we're doing projects, we're doing them in both Mount Bridges, Melbourne, everywhere, not just Strathroy. Looking at the budget list that came out, almost everything, if you look at Parks and Rec, I think I looked over 3 years, I think there was one project in Ward 2. That I don't think is acceptable, especially with how we're going. Again, not to go in the weeds, that's just needed me to feel like we're balanced and we're all one community. On that, we also need to take a look at how we're going to pay for that. And I think we need to open up the discussion not only to how to get more revenue, but how to make better use of our current revenue. Are there services that we are paying duplicate for? Are there efficiencies we can get inside of staff? Are there ways where we can get our costs down without bringing on more headcount? Those are the things that I think probably deserve some time. We need staff to work on that outside of the budget process. We can't get down into the day-to-day efficiencies, but I'm going to ask staff to see if they can come up with something in operations to make that work. And I guess beyond that, it comes down to water and wastewater and roads, same as everyone else. Need to try to get projects where we all work together, feel part of the community. And the last part of it, when it comes down to the asset management plan, something that's hasn't been that much of a focus. I've been focusing on it the last little while. Is that if we're not going to maintain our assets, we're going to have to replace them. And maintenance is always cheaper than replacing. So I think we need to take a look at least doing the minimum that we need to keep the asset management plan going. Looking at the report, that's a significant number. I don't know how much we're actually doing and how much of that comes from gas tax, different things. So I'm not going to guess at what that percentage is, but it is a significant number. And I think that's, in addition to what we got to do for water and wastewater, I think the asset management plan kind of ties into all of that. And we need to make sure we're at least keeping up with the minimum spend we need to maintain our assets. And I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Brannan?
Well, I'll add my voice to the choir. I agree with everything said so far. But if I had to come down to a couple of observations, I'd say number one, tonight we need to set a clear number to give staff a direction in terms of preparing documents for us for consideration. So a tax increase of between 5 and 8% I think is on the table. I would like to see a clear end date to this process, and if that means we have to double up on meetings in January, so be it. Let's get this thing done. In terms of infrastructure, my top priority, I think, would be a fire station for Ward 2, much along the lines of what Councillor Wilsey said. I think we should have equity here between Ward 1 and Ward 2 as much as possible, reflecting, you know, the difference in population and needs. But I think we need to have a fire station in Ward 2 that's renovated or a brand new one, much like we're heading for fire station number 1. And beyond that, I think we're going to have to take a look at the order in which we do our roads. We can't do them all in 1 year, so we have to lay out a timeline. And again, a high priority for me as chair of the police board would be the police headquarters annex, which I think is on the table. If we're going to maintain our own police force, we're going to have to invest in it. And the time for an expanded headquarters is now. So those would be my items right now. I could go on at greater length, but that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Mr. Pelton?
Yes, I'm out of luck.
It didn't work yesterday.
Yeah, it was off and on, so that's fine. So I
Just one
tried,
sec, Councillor, we'll see if we can fix it.
There we're in. We are now.
there we go, thank you. I'll admit I'm having a little bit of a trouble trying to digest the multi-year budget process. I was quite comfortable with having a 10-year capital plan and then adjusting things as we see fit. I'm a little worried that how divided we are, that we'll be able to come to a multi-year budget completion in any decent amount of time, which will cost us in terms of projects for next year. I'm trying to take a longer lens look at what we need to do. And the number one issue that I think is the most important discussion, and in 2024 I think it's only going to be a discussion, is on a municipal complex in Mount Bridges. And when I say complex, I mean a piece of property that will house the fire hall, a rec complex, a works yard, and a dog park at a minimum, and then maybe more after that if there's more need for sports fields. I think if we're looking at purchasing property and I see that lines in there in the fire budget, I think we need to maybe look at the lens bigger and buy a piece of property that's big enough to support all those things, whether or not we're actually building them all in the short term. If we're going to end up running Servicing out to support a municipal building, then we might as well run Servicing out to do multiple municipal buildings. In the short term, I think the most important thing for me is that, you know, while we sink the big money into roads and water and sewer, we can't lose sight of the things that people can touch and feel and use every day. So I'm talking playgrounds, I'm talking things that, money on events, stuff that make people remember there's a reason to live here other than the road they drive on and when they flush the toilet, the water goes somewhere, because they don't really think about those things. As far as the water and wastewater plans, we have plans. I want to see them executed. I would like to, as we move forward, always keep a lens to transit, and while transit may be a decade down the road, I think that as we're placing townhouses and apartment buildings and building roads, we need to think about where potential bus stops might be sometime in the future. And I would also like to see us rank those big ticket items in order. And if we can get that out of this budget process, I think that will be a big win.
Okay. Councillor Derbyshire?
Well, I'm gonna go in a different direction because I don't know. It just drives me, I can't do it. I would like to see the budget process where we as a council more decide as opposed to sending it back to staff with a 5.8 number and just letting them decide what projects we're doing. I'd like to see it put up there where we can have it up there. They can give us our priorities, 1, 2, 3, what they want. We as a council can go around the room and decide, put all line ones or priority ones on the board, right? Okay, that totals 43 million. That's a 20% tax increase. Then we start voting and pulling them out till we get to a point where we're happy with the tax rate that we're at. It then becomes our budget, not we gave staff 5% and it's their budget or their plan. Like I feel like we do a lot of talking that it's our choice and our decision, but if all we do is give a number, it's not our choice, it's their projects. I realize everyone loves rec and all that other stuff that we can touch, feel, and move, but we have water and wastewater in Mount Bridges that is critically maxed out. And we're not talking about it, we're not moving forward with much of anything either. that's where I think that needs to go, but I really think that we as a council need to take back where we're headed with this and not just give staff a 5 or 8% number and say, please find us something to do with it. That's just my opinion.
Okay, Councilor Pam. Easy for me to say.
Yeah. So I would agree with everybody here that infrastructure, particularly Mount Bridges with the wastewater and the water, is urgent, and we need to come to an agreement on the plan for that and set the money aside for that. And going hand in hand with that, of course, is emergency services, fire and police. We have a responsibility for protection too. So I think that those are, for me, are a very high priority. But then as we move a little further down, you know, I do believe that things that enhance quality of life for living in Strathroy-Caradoc are important. Sometimes they're a little bit of wants rather than, or needs, wants rather than needs. But if we can, you know, take some time, quality of life is important to people, and it's important to all of us in our day-to-day and our mental health to have parks and trails and recreation spaces and recreation opportunities. It's all part of a healthy community. So I don't think we can completely take our eyes off of that. I will echo too that the downtown, I feel, is very important. Having been a business owner in the downtown for the past 10 years, we've been promised this for 10 years, that it was coming, and it just is one of those things that's always getting kicked down the road. And I think if you look at other communities, one thing that we'll learn is if you don't have a vibrant core, you have a lot of trouble. So I think it's really important that project, which may seem like a little bit touchy-feely or cosmetic, is actually really important to the community and to the wellness of the community.
Deputy Mayor.
Well, thank you, Your Worship, for letting me go last, because I get the benefit of hearing everybody that came before me. So I agree with just everything that was said. It was it's a good conversation. I think priorities for me are Fire Station 1, and I'm really happy to see the way that vote went. And then Fire Station 2 is on its heels. I think the police station is woefully too small, and that needs to come up to standards. I think we need to take a quick look at Tri-Township Arena. I think the reality is that building another arena immediately is likely not financially feasible. So there's a great project, there's some plans, we spoke about it last night at the meeting, but I think we need to just look at sprucing up Tri-Township Arena, and probably for little money we can do some pretty nice stuff and make that a little bit better for Ward 2. Still concerned about water, wastewater, primarily wastewater in Mount Bridges. I think there are alternatives to what we are doing, and I don't think that we're really giving those ideas a chance. I think continuing with housing and the varieties of housing that we have in the community is going to be critical for the future. Operationally, I would just like to see staff, and I don't want to get involved in it, but I think we need to start looking at more of our partnerships, and that probably is at the county. We do pay the county a levy, they call it. Part of your taxation dollars go to the county. It's set by the county. Every other community in this county receives more because they choose to than we are. I think we have to always be thinking outside the box, and I think if anybody ever asks the question why, that should always be taken as a valid question, because why we are doing something and why we aren't going down another path or taking a look at something is the only way you're ever going to make change.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Wilson, I was glad to hear you talked about Ward 2, because I did note too that the lack of capital is, and I think that is important if we can find a way, and it's probably for small dollars to do something. I've always called them the underserved areas, whether it's Campbellvale or Melbourne or anywhere in the rural areas in Ward 2. I think that would go a long way, and more spending in Mount Bridges, but we're just gonna open it up for discussion, but I think Deputy Mayor gave a good segue. We did have an arena committee meeting last night, and it is a matter of public record, so I'm gonna ask Councillor Pelkman, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm going to. I think all the council would benefit by hearing what we talked about last night at arena committee, and if more public are tuned into this, I think there was some positive news that came out of arena committee last night, so. Because I know that's a big ticket item on there, it's out in 2028, but if you're prepared to talk to it, and we could just open it up for discussion.
Sure, I don't know that there was any news came out of the meeting, but there was definitely discussion. So the mayor initiated the discussion in terms of the projected price tag for the project that we came up with, you know, being at approximately $35 million is maybe more than this community can bear. So he wanted to see if there was any will to look at a 3P, so a private-public partnership, to see if we could find somebody who might be willing to share in the costs, and then, you know, that brings up a whole other list of items in terms of you know, what are you willing to give up to do that. So we went through a range of options that are currently out there. One which would be that you build the whole thing and a management company operates it. That doesn't solve our $35 million price tag. So that option wasn't really a viable option. Another one might be that we share in the building costs of whether we provide the land and maybe pay for a portion of the building if we still wanted a gymnasium, and that a private operator build the rink, and then the municipality purchase the ice time from the private operator and then turn around and sell it at a loss to minor hockey and figure skating, and then the rec leagues would be at their paying at the private rate as opposed to the subsidized municipal rate. So we agreed that we would be interested in putting a request to see if there's any interest out there by anybody. We can't define the terms because we don't know what we're even looking at, so we're hoping that maybe somebody with a bunch of cash out there might put a suggestion forward, and then we can have a discussion in terms of the rest of council about whether or not that's a viable option. Again though, you know, like as I said in my 5 minutes, you know, if we're purchasing property for a fire hall, I think we should look at purchasing a bigger piece of property and look at building the rec center there rather than where we're currently looking. To me, that makes more sense. If you're gonna invest the money to bring servicing out to the edge of the community, then you might as well do it for Arena 2. When we were looking at the spot in where the Caradoc Community Center was, you know, we were under the impression that the time frame was short that we had, and that's the only piece of property we owned. But we're still designing that in case the federal or provincial governments come up with a one-third, and we would probably jump at that because that would be a lot of free money. And so yeah, that was kind of the discussion last night. If, you know, we have to be somewhat ready if something comes up, but if it doesn't, then, you know, what's a longer term solution or a different option than what we're currently looking at.
Yeah, Councilor, just for everyone, it's not a pipe dream. Western Fair, those arenas, that's a private arena, and Deputy Mayor and I sat in today at the county and approved the zoning for the proposed arena medical center just outside of Kamoka. That's a rather large, that's a twin pad with a medical clinic with a restaurant, so it's not a pipe dream. It's something that's doable, it might just take some time. Councillor Palmer?
Yeah, just adding on to that, I was gonna say, if you know, take a look around Ontario at what's been built lately, you know, you'll see that a lot of them are partnerships, if not with private, with, you know, YMCAs and libraries, all attached to things. And I like this, even in St. Thomas, where we saw the new Indwell building, it has a fire hall attached to it. So I think that this idea is, obviously, there's some economies of doing this together, and I think that it sounds like we have some capital needs in Mount Bridges, so I think we should definitely consider that option of putting them together in some way, and it might end up saving us a fair chunk of money doing it that way too.
Councillor Hippel?
Thank you. I was, through yourself, as a comment, I was part of the meeting last night and some really good conversation, but I have a quick question. So, obviously everyone always knows that I'm pro arena in Mount Bridges. That's a huge thing for me. However, my question is this: we have, is that something, so if I'm also thinking that it just makes sense to purchase a large piece of property, and I think it makes sense in the long run, but is that something you put on, I mean, we're gonna sit down and go through our main priorities that are absolute must-haves, that we have to get done, we know that. So do we go through that and then look, when we're doing the multi-year budget, do you look at something like purchasing, you know, a piece of land, or do we look at something like that and put that in, you know, 4 years down the road, or do we put that in like 8 years down the road? And the reason I ask you this is because if we're going further down the road, then we need to put money, like, are we putting money in reserves for that? And if we're doing that, like, so we need to start looking at all the reserves. But then my other question is, what do we do with the facility as there now? So I did talk about this last night, saying, you know, that's great. We know that this is something that we'd like to do. I'm assuming we'll all talk about it. Maybe we won't want to, maybe we will. But assuming that this is what we're going to do down the road, we need to be putting money into some money, or putting money aside for the Tri-Township Arena right now. And I don't want this whole entire meeting tonight to be about that. I just am asking, so is this something that we need to do tonight, is say, okay, let's put aside, we're gonna have to put aside a couple $1 million or a couple $100,000 to push the glass up, or where does that come into effect, that we think that we're gonna have to push that to the forefront as opposed to looking at Arena 5?
I'm gonna turn it over to Councillor Brown, just a comment. Actually, that's excellent conversation, because I see the CAO and Mr. Dakin back there writing, so they need to know that that's something we need to look at, to take back to staff, that, okay, there's a conversation about a land purchase, and staff may not know, if we don't tell them, that you may have to look at putting dollars into Tri-Township Arena. So that's good conversation. Councillor Palkman.
Yes, thank you. Personally, I think my answer to that question is, you know, we don't need to replace the works yard in the short term. The public doesn't care if there are rusty doors or on that facility, right? We just know that someday that those buildings are getting pretty old, that we're gonna look at moving it. And so if you, probably the first one out of the gate is the fire hall. So that when you go shopping for land for the fire hall, you go shopping for land big enough to accommodate the other pieces, and then you lease that land out to a farmer to farm until some point in time that we need it, and you build what you need first. So that would be how I would look at the process.
Yep. Councillor Derbyshire.
All right, so how are we paying for any of this? Like, and to me, if for every $150,000 we spend equals 1% on a $5 million or $6 million fire hall over 10 years, That's a 5% increase annually. So what are we willing to put the tax rate at? We all have great, this is wonderful that we all want, what are we willing to set the rate at? And if we want a 10% hike for the next 20 years, then we can do 3 fire halls, a sportsplex and something else. That doesn't mean when the Main Street pipe blows, we gotta come up with some emergency money, right? So now we're going to borrow. Like, I think there's more to this than just figuring out where we wanna spend our recreational money. We have to come up with a 4-year plan that says, we're either gonna 3, 4, 5, what is our tax increase? What have we already increased it? Like, there's our next question. What is this new fire hall that we've already approved? How long is it? What's the duration? What's it costing us annually? What have we already increased our tax rate? Money we borrowed last year to do projects, I think we borrowed $4 million. Where's that now that we're in and these projects are complete and that money's borrowed? Where does this take us? Like, I sit here and I listen to all this, and that's great that we want to do this, but it is, again, the Christmas wish list of here's what I'd like to do. We have to figure out how to do it. Like, even when you said, Frank, about, you know, last time we borrowed $12 million, we still owe 1 point something on that money.
No, we don't.
Well, there's still $1 million something debt.
That's other things have been stuff in the future.
It's fire trucks, it's,
Fire trucks came out of DC charges.
not all of them.
Yeah, well, the last 2 tankers, I'm just telling you, that's what it says in the DC charges. But this is a, all right, boys, just write her up.
Yeah, Councillor Paulman, then we'll go to Councillor.
Yeah, so, you know, I do understand where you're coming from, and I know how you feel, because I was there one time too, you know. So first of all.
You guys came through the best time to be around. Yeah, you did. 2008 was the worst time, was when interest rates went crazy. After that, what has it done?
Okay.
I really
So,
need to be here.
you know,
I'm just gonna.
stuff has to get,
Point of order, language.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, he just F-bombed.
Are you out of your
Point
mind?
of order.
I didn't say F anything.
2 under your mouth.
Okay.
Hey,
Okay, we're gonna take a recess.
well then can
Thank
it?
you.
No, we're gonna take a recess, can I ask
Rightly
staff,
so.
everybody leave?
You want to sum up?
Under your breath.
I
Councillor,
never F-bomb nothing.
no,
Under your breath, you
in my desk there, Frank.
Thank you, we're back. Thank you, everyone, just,
I'll get it next.
just a note to, everyone, Councillor Derbyshire has left the meeting, so we will continue where we left off. We just have an open, honest discussion on our priorities as we see them. So, did anyone else want to jump in? Councillor Pelkman.
Yes, thank you. You know, I understand Councillor Derbyshire's question about the tax rate and the concern that as we look at these projects, and some of them are big, that, you know, there's an impact to the tax rate, and there will be an impact to the tax rate. But I also want the newer members of council to recognize that there's more revenue at play than just raising the tax rate. You know, as housing assessment comes on to play, and we're about 2 years behind, so we still see at least, I think, one more year of that big growth yet to come on to our tax rolls, as well as now some industrial growth that's happened in the last 2 years that will help significantly. Over the past 20 years that I've been on council, that's how we've managed our projects. Our spending has gone up, the size of the projects that we've done has gone up, yet we've been able to manage the tax rate at or around the rate of inflation at a predictable rate that people can count on, because I think that's what's important. You know, people, I myself, with the way that banking has changed, my car loan comes out with my paycheck, my mortgage comes out with my paycheck. You know, it's a timing thing. It's about cash flow and not necessarily about what it is per month. And so I think that, you know, that's a lot of the way that I hear people live these days. And so what we do needs to be predictable for the people, so they can count on the fact that I make this amount of money and I'm looking at buying a car, and I can count on the fact that my property taxes are not going to double. You know, they're going to increase at about 3 to 5% a year, and we will continue that. And we'll look at raising rates and user fees, and going after grants, and using assessment, and placing using the funds that we've set aside at when we need them. That's how we manage the tax rate. It's not just we need a new fire hall, all of it's going to be applied on the tax rate. It doesn't work that way. It's not the way it happens. And so people need to understand that when we're talking. And the fear, I mean, because if you take that position, then we're not going to do anything ever until we've saved enough money to do everything. And the reality is that asset management plan hasn't been around long enough for us to do that. We've had to purchase everything and try to save for it again at the same time, which has only been, the last 8 to 10 years we've been doing that. That's a heartbeat in the life of municipal assets. And so, you know, you need to take a deep breath sometimes and go, you know, this is stuff we have to do, and not doing anything means we get farther behind and in a worse position than we are now.
Yeah, thank you. And I think similar, but I agree with all those things. There's all kinds of levers we can pull. Councillor Kaufman, you know, it's grants, it's tax, it's DCs, there's loans we can get. And there is another one that we have not talked about. We're in the business of delivering service, and if it came to it, there is an option of looking at service delivery. And that's an uncomfortable discussion, but it's one that is out there, and I think that's why you look at the budget and you get a number, and then staff can come back and make their recommendation. Councillor Kennis.
I just wanted to add, I mean, you know, big assets are borrowed for. There are very few people in this municipality, or anywhere for that matter, that can buy a house or a farm or a factory with cash. They borrow the money over a long period of time, and that's the only way most people would be able to afford to buy a house, is they mortgage over a long period of time, or a car, whatever the case might be. And you know, that's what I would be suggesting on some of those bigger projects. I mean, a fire hall is going to last 40 or 50 years, or you know, yeah, those bigger assets are gonna last a long period of time, and you're gonna pay for them over a long period of time, and it's not gonna be paid out of cash in a given year. So I think we have to keep that in mind as well, and when we're looking at those things, ask during, during the time when we send staff back to work on the budget, what if we borrow X amount of dollars to build this facility, what's that gonna cost us over the next 20 years, and how does that impact tax rates and all that kind of stuff? So yeah, it's not about paying it out of cash flow today, because that just doesn't happen, so.
Yeah. We go to Councillor Wilsey, then you, Councillor Brennan.
The one thing that I would look up is just looking at the numbers and the sheet that came out to us. We had a list of capital that's presented with the meeting. There's a few things on that have a lot of projects, and we can finance all of those, that will have to be paid in 1 year. But what I noticed that's missing on that is there's a significant number of projects that we've already have in the design phase that aren't on there. So even though that's a big number that's already on that, there is probably another 10 or 15 million dollars at least in projects that aren't included in that list. That's the list we got it from staff to look at. The other thing is when we're only looking at the capital, that's only one part of the budget. We still have the operations. There's the cost of living allowances that are going to have to come from staff. We don't know how much our assessment is going to be going up for the next year for like that. There's all these other things we don't know. So before we just give out a tax number, we're really going in blind with about 2/3 of our budget. So I think we need to get a more wholesome look at what we're looking at. And if we could decide tonight, my question would be, as a council, can we put together some priorities and then have staff come back with a report, let us know how much our operations is going to go up with cost of living and with the extra debt that we haven't seen the numbers of the payments on. How much our assessment has gone up to give us that much, and then look at all of that together, and maybe we can come up with a more manageable increase, or maybe we do need to do, like we did with the water rates previously, maybe we do need a larger increase for a couple of years to catch up, so we can make headway on the asset management plan. But just looking at the capital, and not looking at our operations, and not looking at any of the increased assessments, or what the debt we've already incurred and what those payments are going to be, if we don't have all that information, we're really just flying blind, and I don't know if that's the best decision that we could make at the moment.
Anybody else? Councillor Brennan, and I had something too for you, Councillor Wilsey. Yep.
All good points. When we're taking a look at the 10-year spending plan on capital projects, I think something we have to do is to keep in mind some of the things that Councillor Pelkman was saying, which I would agree with heartily, and that is that we need to understand that in municipal finance, it's different than private sector finance. We have the ability to a great extent, control our future revenue flow, the size of it. And we can, if we want to, take a look at a 10-year projection. And I think Councillor Dakin, I've done this before with other projects and developing future funds and stuff like that. We can take a look at, like what's the effect of over the next 10 years, given the projected growth of the community, and given maybe an average, increase in taxes each year of anywhere between 5 to 4%. At the end of 10 years, what's our tax revenue? And what we want to do is try and bend that curve upwards. We don't want a linear curve. We want a curve that kind of bends up. And we want to have, if possible, the ability to match our revenue growth with our spending objectives, the things that we're going to have to pay for. But in municipal finance, we also have the ability to defer and prioritize. And so when I talk about setting a number for staff between 5 and 8% tonight or at another meeting, the idea is to have them come back with rating number 1, number 2, number 3, the priorities for each of the departments. And like we have done in many other years, we then take a look and say, well, if we did everything, what would the increase be? And we take a look up at the front and we see it's like 37% or something shocking. And then we begin, as councillors, to whittle away at the list. And we don't have to accept what staff brings us, but staff's advice is to inform and advise. And then we take a look at what we think the priorities should be and what we feel tax increases are justified. But when we're taking a look at a 10-year plan or a multi-year plan of spending projects, I think we have to also take a look at what our potential revenues are going to be over the years. And in the second year of a 4-year mandate, if we have a 5% increase, if you will, then we benefit from that in years 3 and 4. And obviously the way numbers work is if you have a 4% or a 3%, it's on top of that 5. And you get an increase on the increase. And that way we are able to meet our obligations in terms of what's happening. So I sympathize with anyone who comes on council for the first time, because I was on council for the first time. And in the best of all possible worlds, we can have all the information we need to make all our decisions with certainty. I'll tell you, from 23 years on council, it never exists. You always have to make decisions with the information you have at the time. You kind of do the best you can, and then each year it's a dynamic process. You just keep getting there, and it never stops. It's a continual a cycle, and it's not for the faint of heart. It's a tough thing to do.
Just, I have a question myself, or either Director Dakin or CO McKibben. How far along are we with the operations budget? Because then I have another direct question.
So, based, through the chair to the chair, so based on the discussions early, I guess it was September when we had that 3% increase idea floated, staff have gone back, directors have gone back and created a multi-year budget on operations. We're now in the process of pulling all those pieces together. We obviously started with the capital because we thought that was a bigger chunk. So we've done that capital. We're doing the exact same thing that you see in front of you with the capital. We're doing that with the operations, so we can pull those two together.
Okay.
So it's in the process. All those numbers in. We haven't put everyone's together yet, so I've got everyone's budget, but we haven't put it all on one sheet yet, so we know what that total increase is. But everyone was given direction to try and stick around the 3% as much as possible.
Okay. Any, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. So, we're talking about like spending more money, spending a little bit more money. I would like to see us prioritize the idea of where can we save money. In every other major budget that I have passed in the last year, although new to this, like we end up in budgets, and I've passed millions of dollars worth of budgets. And in each and every one in today's climate, we have cut. So I think, again, we need to, I agree with everything that's being said, but we need to also be looking at where are the savings? What are we missing? Where are the savings? And I think there are potential savings in partnerships, realignments. I think re-looking at other projects that we've talked about before. I think there's places that we can save money, and that allows us to put more on the wish list. That's all I'm asking, is we keep it at two-faceted. Where are we spending, and where can we save to pull everything together? Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Canis.
Just one thing I wanted to mention, it came up in London as well, and not, I mean, we're certainly can't compare ourselves to London, but I think they did a survey of taxpayers there, and I think it was like more than around 50% said we would rather see taxes raised than services cut, whereas I think it was 37% said I'd rather see services cut than taxes raised. So assuming, you know, we live pretty close, assuming our people kind of think the same way, you know, there is still a desire to maintain services as well. And I agree with the deputy mayor, but I think there's, you know, this is the first meeting and there are so many questions and so many things up in the air, and we have to make assumptions. You have to make, somehow you got to make an assumption to start with, and then roll those numbers through and see what that looks like. And if the assumption, you know, it comes back and says, oh, we got to raise taxes 20%, obviously we're not going to do that. So then we need to start cutting things back. And so I think there's you know, we all want to be, we want to do things, and we want to do them at a reasonable rate. But we, you know, we've got to start somewhere, and now, you know, we're saying, okay, tonight we're going to start, and then we need to work from there. And be optimistic, you know. As others have said, this is an easy sport, but we gotta start somewhere, and to say, I'm not gonna do it, or don't do anything at all, that's not possible. We need to move forward.
Yes. Councillor Wilsey.
I'd like to say that whatever budget we put through and whatever we ask staff on, we make sure that the goals from the asset management plan, I think at a minimum, we have to make sure that we're maintaining our assets. If we're not maintaining our assets, regardless of what we build, we're moving backwards. So I think at a minimum, what we need to do, and just listening to everyone here, we have assets, we need to keep what we're going. I would say before we build any new projects, we need to set aside enough money to catch up on our requirements from the asset plan on a yearly basis, because that is a yearly requirement. I think that should be just as important as operations and staff, because if we don't maintain our assets, our roads will be more expensive to fix. Our wastewater is gonna, everything, our buildings are gonna take more money to maintain, and everything's gonna be an emergency, and it's gonna cost more money. So that's a suggestion that I've got, is that the asset management plan be the #1 priority, and we look at, of course, not #1 over fire halls and emergency services, but as a baseline, the asset management plan needs to be a baseline with operations and everything else, just on a yearly basis going forward, so we can maintain our assets, so we don't go backwards.
Can I agree with it? I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, I come from manufacturing, that's #1. You have to protect and maintain your assets. Of me, then I'm thinking priority may be maintain and fix current rather than do something completely new. So I agree with what you said, Councillor Wilsey. Councillor Pelkman, did you move your hand up? No? Okay. I do think though, I do think though, knowing the way municipal, we do need to talk about taxation. That is part of it. We're not unique. That's the way every municipal government starts. We need to give our staff a number to shoot for, and they know I've seen CO McKibben in writing notes. She will take back our priorities to staff. They will hear from us. I'm sure they'll hear things, Greg, like maintaining the assets that we have and setting more dollars aside. But I do think it's important that we have the tax number. We need to give something back to staff as a starting point, and not to make anybody go. You can tell them come back with 10%. We can whittle it down. They need a guidepost. And that's what we need to give staff tonight. We had given one earlier. I think it was 3%, or 3.5%, if I remember correctly. But we leave here tonight, we need to give staff a guidepost. So let's open it for discussion on that number. Councillor Brennan.
Not to put our CAO or our finance director or anyone on the spot, but there have been recent percentages set by other municipalities in our region in the last while, and the mayor had referenced a couple as well. But I've been kicking around the number 5 to 8%. But do we know at this point what some of the other numbers that have come in from some budgets in our area? This is an unfair question to hit you with, but I don't know if the CEO or the finance director have that information.
Through the chair to
Just
council.
jump in anytime, Tricia.
I unfortunately don't have that list in front of me, but they have ranged from, and again, we get notices from across the province as budgets pass and things. So we've seen sort of 3 to 7% are the ones that I have sort of been privy to that have come up. And that again is not just necessarily around us, but across the province.
I think London's initial was 5, I think, 5.5 today. And the rate of inflation I checked this morning is 3.5. And that's predicted to stabilize. Any other comments on Councillor Wilsey?
When staff are coming back to it, and this is not so much on the tax rate we set, but listening to the director, he had asked staff to come up with a budget for each of their departments of a 3% increase. Are we able to ask to come up with a 0% operations increase so that we can focus on capital? I think that, I have appetite for that. I don't know what council thinks.
Open up, we'll go with Councillor Pammer, then you, Councillor Talkman.
Well, I think in order to do that, then we'd have to look at cuts somewhere, because we have to give cost of living increases and general union-related increases. So the amount is gonna go up, even if we did nothing, right? So I don't know how we could get it zero other than doing cuts. And we would have to get some sort of report back, and, or cuts or efficiencies, like, so, but we would need some sort of report back on that.
And just as a rebuttal, that was my thought, that if staff could come back and see what we could do if a 0% increase in operations was possible, so that we could focus on capital. And the only reason I look at that is I've done some math and looking at previous budgets over the last 4 years. 4 years ago, in 2019, our operations budget was $15 million, and the taxation portion of what we spent on capital was about $3.5. It stayed at $3.5 for the last 4 years, but our operations budget has grown from 15 to 19. So our operations budget has increased by $4 million per year, but our capital has been within a couple $100,000 on the tax rate and debt, if you add those two portions together for the last 4 years. So we have not increased our capital spend, but we've increased our operations spend by more than 25%.
Yeah, I'm actually not afraid of that idea, but let's see what comes back. So I just want to tell you, Councillor Wilsey, I'm not afraid of going back to staff or anybody and saying, you know, you have to cut to get to this number, or whatever it may, service delivery, but there's a lot that goes into it, so I would suggest, I'm not opposed, I'm just one vote. Let's see what comes back at the first, and let's see what fleshes out in terms of capital that we can do. I just want to tell you, I'm not necessarily opposed to that conversation.
And if it comes back and that's what we look at it, then that's fine. I just wanted to throw the idea out there that
Everything's on the
we
table,
need to look
Greg.
at operations too.
Yep. Councillor Pop, sorry.
No, I withdraw. Yep, you covered it, thank you.
I have absolutely zero appetite for that discussion. I lived coming onto council after 5 or 6 years of 0% and the amount of crap that wasn't done because they were trying to cut. We have worked so hard to try and become a progressive municipality, and because of COVID, people have changed their habits. We got a shot at keeping them here in the municipality to do stuff, which we didn't have before. We've put stuff in place to do that, to keep them here, like the Saturday market, like the events, like the seniors programming, and that's the first stuff that's gonna go. And I have zero appetite for that discussion, because that's the stuff that makes people proud to live here. It's not the fact that you live on Queen Street and you got fresh curbs. That does not make you feel proud to live here. It's about being able to walk down the main street and enjoy meeting the people that you know in the community. It's about being able to go to the basketball court and play a game pickup with your friends and not have to go. Like, I can remember a time where we were hanging out with a group of kids that, when I was working with theirs, and we went to Poplar Hill and Coldstream because they had better facilities than Strathroy did. That's not the case anymore. Let's keep it that way. I have zero appetite for that discussion of having a 0%. Zero, absolutely zero.
Sorry, Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. The number I'd be interested in the operating budget would be what number staff comes back to with us as the percentage increase required to maintain existing services. I would like to see that benchmark. And if we could have a number that says this is the number that is going to maintain a level of service for next year, then that's a starting point for council to then see whether or not they wish to add additional services and increase the operating budget, or at that point, when we maybe have an idea of what's happening with capital, then we might take a look at whether or not there's an appetite for service cuts. But I'd like to know what the number is for maintaining services in our current operating budget. I'd like to see that number, and then council would then be able to decide what to do at that point.
Okay, that's fair. Deputy Mayor.
Just a question to you, Your Worship. Do we need to motion this, or?
I think we need to have a motion to direct, so the
I'll
one
second
thing we
John.
need a motion on is.
I would make that.
I'll second, please.
I would make that motion.
So we'll read the motion back, so.
I would ask staff to bring back a percentage increase number on our operating budget that's designed to maintain the 2023 level of service that we've had. And I'd like to know what percentage it is to maintain it for 2024.
You second?
Seconded, please.
Have a motion, any questions, comments? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We haven't circled back and completed the discussion or had a motion regarding any possible tax increase, right? We had, so Councillor Pelton.
I say we start with 5%, and I'll make that a motion.
Second. Okay, second motion, any comments before voting? Councillor Brennan.
I have no problem with the number. I think knowing that, I would also like to have information when we get that number as to what the tender dates are on major projects that need to be completed by in a specific and timely fashion. So there's the percentage number certainly, but then there's just knowing, you know, what's time sensitive. Are we going to have to consider, like we have in other years, passing some capital projects before the budget is finished in order to be able to tender?
And I apologize, I meant to make that one of our deliverables tonight, because I may turn this to either Mr. Dakin or the CAO, because on page 7 of the CAO's report, and we're just talking 2024, there were some items on there, and I agree, we need to go out for tenders so we can get the pricing. So CAO, or do you want to speak to the priorities that are on there?
Thank you, Your Worship, to Council. So again, on page 7 of the report is, again, just some of the large capital projects for 2024. The Queen Street Phase 2 and the Recreation Complex multi-use building pavilions. Tenders would like to be out by the end of February to ensure best costs, availability, and response to tenders, but also that there's time to get shovels in the ground for the project. So the end of February for capital projects to get tenders out is the sort of key timeline.
So when do you need approval on them, CAO? You need, if it's end of February, when do you need approval from us?
I think in January would give us enough
We got
time
it
to
in
get.
January, so we're okay in January, and we can ask some questions, okay? Okay, so there's nothing tonight that we need approval on? No?
I don't feel at this point.
Okay.
Well, the big one's been done.
The big one's been done, the fire hall. Okay.
We still just need the vote.
Yeah, we need the vote, so any further discussion on 5% increase? Yep, sorry.
Just to, you know, don't get people alarmed that we're gonna increase taxes 5%. This is just starting point to do calculations from, right? So.
It's a working number.
Yep. Any further questions? Got the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. I think the last thing we need to do is have the discussion around the end date for this. We do need to put some discipline and have it. I'll take input from either Mr. Dakin or CEO McKibben, when the ideal, wait till we got in there. CAO? Oh, sorry, when do you feel we should have the budget completed by? I know we don't want it to drag on, and I see Councillor Pelkman has a comment or an idea.
Actually, I have a question, a clarification on your question.
Okay.
So are we talking a 2024 budget or the multi-year budget? Because we would have the possibility of continuing to work on a multi-year budget, but at some point say, you know what, we need to pass 2024 now and then continue on with the planning.
I hadn't considered that, so, yeah. Whatever, I'll defer.
Through the chair to Councillor Pelkman, I think that's probably a good idea, because I think we need to get another budget under our belt. We've done 2023, now we do 2024, and if we have the idea that we would commit to in 2024, getting our multi-year, so 25, 26, and 27 out, I think that would be beneficial. Because obviously the timing is of the essence for capital stuff, because I think a good example is the fire station. With the way that we went through that process, we were able to get very good pricing because they know now in January they have a job to come to. And so I think when it comes to the capital, the sooner we can pass capital, the better. But yeah, I think that's an excellent idea, that what we do is sort of get the 24 done by March, with the idea of committing to keeping going on the multi-year piece, and so that we sort of have that through the, by December, I would say, of the year.
I just want to
So
clarify.
I will go to CAO then to.
I'm not suggesting we start out that way. I'm suggesting we start out with the multi-year budget
Yes.
process. And if we can't make progress at some point, we have to ask ourselves, is the timing at the point where we need to say, okay, let's focus on 2024 only. But I am not suggesting we start out that way, because I
You just
think,
want to be flexible.
and I think that as a group of 9, we need to come up with a collective plan, because if we don't, we're gonna be arguing and bickering the
That's
whole.
what we're trying to do, yep. You had something, CAO?
For a sort of finite timeline
Yeah.
for staff's perspective, passing in March would be the latest that I would like to see. It just gives staff time to get the projects done that need to be done in the year, and still looking at potentially, by having discussions, getting some pre-approval if we needed to for some of these projects to get tenders out, so that we can meet by the end of February with the budget passing either at the first meeting in March or the second meeting in March.
So we'll go just comment. I wrote down a date because I know a couple councillors away. I had wrote down possibly March 17th. That's just me. I like to give dates. Councillor Hippel.
Thank you. For yourself, just a comment, but actually, sorry, question. So in the process that we're working on right now, and I mean, instead of having meetings, I mean, we need to get this done, but we need to be thorough, we need to do it properly. Instead of having, 2 or 3 meetings a week, which ultimately is honestly what we should be doing moving forward, so we can get this done and get it done right, and all really talk to one another. Is this something that we do it 2 or 3 times a week, or do we have like a meeting like on a Friday, or not a Friday, but on a Saturday, and you start at 8:30 in the morning? The reason I'm asking this is because we always seem down, we always are crunching, we're always on a time crunch, and if we, once we get this done for March, I mean, can we start the budget process earlier? I mean, is that a thing? I've never done that before, so I'm truly, purely asking that question. Can we start it earlier so we're not crunching and perhaps having long meetings on a Saturday?
Yeah, Councillor Brand, were you just nodding your head?
I'm nodding,
So I think we're all in
I'm-
agreement. I think the next steps, sorry, I apologize, it was,
No,
my
to Councillor, the Councillor's question, I think ideally we want to have budgets passed before the end of December, like before you get into the new year, right? So I think we'd all like to get there at some point, and we also, I know the other thing I was going to mention, we're also in a strategic planning exercise right now as well. So we're waiting for, it's going to be a while before we get input on that. So I think, having a workable 2024 budget is where we need to have our heads at, but then also to continue on to look beyond that based on the input that we get in the months ahead will be important as well.
Councillor Pammer.
You mentioned earlier London had a cutoff date of March. Was that for their multi-year budget?
Yes.
Yeah, because I would like to see, I think ideally we should, set the goal of having a multi-year budget done by March. And then, with, obviously, in maybe November, we could then just take a quick sort of snapshot at 2025. Is there anything that's happened, anything that's changed before we approve that in December? But I think if we, we just need to put our heads down and get it done, I'd be willing to put in the extra time to get that completed.
Yeah, I just comment, that is part of the multi-year budget process, that every year you do a review, because climates change, economics change, so that would be part of it. Deputy Mayor?
I just caution, when Councilor Hippel said about coming in and doing a whole day Saturday meeting. I find they generally don't bear a lot of fruit for the amount of time you're putting in. I think you get far more to say, we've got 2 hours, get in, sit down, go, and the clock ticks and you're gone. That's, I think, when people work the best with numbers. All day, we end up in circles. That's my thought.
So if you leave it with
It's exhausting.
CAO McKibben, we will circulate a schedule and we can talk about it, but just, I can get to you, Greg, by the way, but the next step is moving forward. Our next meetings would be departmental, just individual departments to give some intense scrutiny to their budget, so we could sit down and give more time, and we will get the line by line will come to everybody. We don't need to go over that particularly if you have questions, but we'll all get an opportunity to see the full budget and ask questions of each department. Councillor Wilsey.
I was just going to ask, and through you to the director and the CAO, the Excel sheet that we received today with the projects that are missing that we already have in design. Some of the estimates I'm looking at it, I know when I do an estimate when I'm working with some of my clients and we're putting together a 5-year plan for equipment, and we know what the prices are now, but we know that we're going to buy this phase this year, the next phase next year. We're always factoring in about 5 to 10% for increases because that's what happens. When I look at this sheet, there's a few things that I see as a multi-year budget that are going to be causing us issues as we go forward just with standard practices. I'm looking at my screen now at the downtown street revitalization. I'm just going to pick on that one for a minute. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but it has that pegged at $12 million. Knowing that study, that's all of Frank Street, all of Front Street, and all of the visual stuff, sidewalks and beautification and map bridges. I don't believe that's an accurate number for that. I think that number is probably low. It's probably about a third of what it probably should be, is my thought. I'm not in engineering. I don't know what the actual number is, but I feel that number is really low. There's a couple other projects that I feel are low too, especially based on other projects that we've done recently. So what I would like to see is that Excel sheet updated, but also have some sort of indexing where we have a project where if it's a year out from now, we assume a 5 or 10% increase every year going forward. And another example of that is the arena. We budgeted it at $35 million for this year, and if we look at the sheet, we're going to build it in 5 years, and it's still only going to be $35 million. If we're doing the same plan, it's not going to be $35 million. It's probably going to be 50. So as we push things out, I believe just to be realistic, we're not doing ourselves any favors by lowballing our numbers. I think we need to get actual estimates. And that's just been spoken out by looking at the engineering tenders that have come back this year. They've all been around 30% higher than what we've budgeted. And we're pulling the money out of reserves and different things that we've done, so it hasn't affected the tax rate. But I don't think I've seen an engineering contract come back this year that's been on or under budget. They've all been 20 to 30% high. So I think we need to have the sheet looked at, accurate numbers in it, and then a yearly increase for deferring projects, I think would be something fair. And that way we can have a better idea and we're not saying we need to do a 5 or 10% catch-up rate in 3 years because we didn't plan ahead. That's what I'm trying to avoid with that.
Yep. That's a very good point. I saw Tricia writing it down, so Councillor Kennis.
Just to add on to that, I think it would be helpful for all of us if we got some sort of idea of what debt costs. And so, if we need to borrow $10 or $20 million in the next couple of years, using some average amortization of whatever, 10, 15 years, whatever the case might be, at whatever the perceived rate of interest will be, what will that cost us on a monthly basis or an annual basis? And I think it just gives us kind of an idea of what, you know, what debt costs. I think there's a great fear of debt, and I think we need to understand what debt actually costs, and, you know, what, you know, if that all makes sense, what I'm saying.
I prefer the word investment.
Well,
That's development.
I grew up working with debt, so debt is good.
I think part of that discussion around the debt has also gotta be when some debt payments end. Because we can be adding new debt, but not adding any new payment because the payment's finished. And also, as we're looking at some of these projects, you know, are they balloon payments, are they annual, are they quarterly, are they monthly? I think is also beneficial to know. Right, so I can remember projects that we've done where we've made a purchase in September, but it doesn't actually hit the budget until the next year because the first payment isn't until the following year. And so, you know, that's something we need to keep in mind too, about when those first debt payments will actually start hitting the budgets.
Anything else? All right. Appreciate everybody's time. I actually think this was helpful and fruitful. We did agree on or come to consensus on the three things. Motion to adjourn. Deputy Mayor McGuire, second by Councillor Kennis, all in favor? Carried.